I feel like sustainable fashion can be a divisive topic. I think a lot of the issues come because the sustainable fashion narrative up till now has been controlled by brands whose real objective is to sell you something rather than educate us about sustainable fashion and how that looks. So with that in mind, I asked my subscribers to send in their most pressing questions and controversies around sustainable fashion, and I'm going to get through as many as possible in this video. From the ethics of recycled polyester to how sustainable resale and rental and repair services from fast fashion brands are, to the debate about whether over-consuming secondhand fashion is actually unsustainable, and a whole lot of other subjects. So let's just get into the video. Before we do, welcome back to my channel. My name's Katie. I talk about fashion industry insights, overconsumption, personal style, and how all of those subjects interlink with the sustainable fashion industry. So if that sounds good to you, then please subscribe to my channel and follow me on my other social media. And let's get into the video. I think we should start off with a popular debate I see online every time a fast fashion brand launches a new circularity scheme, like resale or repairing or renting, and making it out to be a step towards becoming more sustainable. I think the motivation for the brands is what's really important here. Fast fashion is built off selling you as much as possible, as low quality as possible. And although a lot of them have jumped onto these circularity schemes, in particular resale, that's mostly because it's becoming a trend in fashion and it's something consumers are looking for, rather than something the brands want to do themselves or know they should be doing. I think it's pretty obvious that this is the case when you consider that brands are jumping on the most popular sustainability messaging right now of wanting to extend the lifetime of clothing, but they're not addressing sustainability in other areas of their business that could really make a difference, like cutting back on the amount of clothing they're producing or cutting back on the marketing machine they employ to make people want to buy. A really good example that shows brands are literally only looking for ways to make money with sustainability rather than actually change their business practice is the upcycling trend that we've seen growing in consumer sentiment in recent years, and how brands have tried to capitalize on this. For example, you have some brands that are creating brand new products that look upcycled, and I did a whole TikTok on this that actually got called up in a news article, and how just disingenuous that feels. I mean, it completely goes against all of the reasons why someone would want to upcycle and focuses purely on the aesthetic it creates and churning that out with fast fashion. On the other hand, you have brands announcing upcycling collections that are actually upcycled from their previous products. Like Miu Miu have just announced a whole collection on this. But funny enough, I've actually called out Miu Miu before as being a luxury fast fashion brand, because despite sustainability initiatives like this, they still continue to perpetuate the trend cycle that fast fashion feeds off of and churn out hundreds of new styles. I think, to summarize, if a fast fashion brand brings out a sustainability initiative like repair, recycling, rental, upcycling collections, without also saying in the statement that this means they'll be decreasing their production volumes, then it's greenwashing. Another hot topic that comes up a lot on my channel is the question of whether you can buy too much when you're thrifting, whether overconsumption exists in secondhand fashion.
I understand the problem of overconsumption, okay? But what I don't get is why overconsumption of secondhand items is seen as bad. It's already been consumed once and it's been put back into the economy, and 80% of things that were donated to the thrift store are going to end up in a landfill anyway, so doesn't it make sense to try to consume as much of that secondhand inventory as possible?
And I kind of want to break this down a little bit. I think although obviously buying secondhand does not have the same impact on the environment as buying firsthand does, and you're not directly giving money to fast fashion companies that are profiting off of cheap prices and cheap labor, it's still an issue to overconsume secondhand. Not only does it not address our own behaviors of overconsumption and feeding into the idea that we need so many clothes only for us to feel overwhelmed with our wardrobes and do a complete clear out and start again and just keep that cycle going, it also gives others who buy a lot of fast fashion a kind of social license to say, well, I'll donate it and someone will pick it up, someone will want all of these clothes that I've bought and no longer need. And again, just kind of perpetuating that take, make, waste model that fast fashion thrives off of. Secondhand shopping itself is not a solution to the climate crisis, it's not likely that we'll ever run out of secondhand clothing. That's not something that would be a problem, even if we are all over consuming it. But our relationship with these clothes does still matter just as much as first-hand items. If your intention is to go to the thrift store, buy as many styles as you can, and then throw them away just as quickly as if you were buying fast fashion, then that doesn't really solve the issue we're trying to solve. Not to mention, a lot of brands have started to develop relationships with secondhand stores and offload some of their unsold inventory into these thrift stores, knowing that they can write off those clothes as charitable donations, they can take it back on taxes, and they then don't have to deal with unsold inventory and change their production model to make less clothing. And I got a comment from a subscriber here that kind of relates. As they rightly point out, buying sustainable doesn't automatically mean you're buying more consciously or that you're tackling your own overconsumptive habits. And I have two examples here I kind of want to break down to show my point. The first came from this TikTok I saw about the byeee brand. I'd never heard of byeee before I watched this TikTok and it came up on my For You page. So I don't think I'm as chronically online as I thought I was, because this seems to be massive and a lot of people own a byeee bag. And when I was doing research on them, it seems that a lot of people market them as the sustainable option. From what I can tell, this is because they sell reusable tote bags for shopping and they use recycled polyester materials. But from what I could tell, the brand itself doesn't actually say they're sustainable. I mean, they have a broken sustainability page website link that is just now a 404. And on their sort of about us section, they never directly say they're sustainable, only that they design with longevity in mind and try to stay away from trends. But the reason I wanted to highlight this is the creators who are tagging the brand, saying hashtag sustainable in the description, are also showing their collection of 20 byeee reusable totes, which just completely undermines the whole idea about why you would need a reusable tote in the first place. I mean, I don't know about you guys, I have about 3 reusable bags I take down to the shops. To be fair, I do small shops at a time, but 20 bags. I just think there's no need for you to own that many reusable bags. Feels like pretty cut and dry overconsumption to me. And I guess the second example that no one's going to be surprised by is the Stanley Cup situation and how many influencers own hundreds of these cups, and also how the brand has fed into this culture. I don't know exactly what byeee do to try either promote or dissuade this idea of overconsumption, but Stanley knows what they're doing. They have released limited edition drops around holidays and with specific colors in order to encourage this buy it while you can until it's gone hoarding mentality of their reusable cups, of which you should only need 1 or 2 at the most. I think TLDR, sustainable products aren't sustainable if you overconsume them. All of that better for the planet stuff is negated if you are buying way more than anyone should need of that product. I don't think we can do a sustainable fashion controversy video without addressing the topic that always comes up of sustainable fashion being too expensive for people to afford, and that being the reason they turn to fast fashion instead. I've done a whole video diving exactly into this topic, so I do want to keep it brief and very specific. I'm not going to mention ultra fast fashion, brands like Shein and Temu, because I really covered that in that video. But I want to talk specifically about Zara and H&M and these mid-market brands that still sell fast fashion, but are starting to creep up in price range. If Zara and H&M and Aritzia and Lululemon and all of these other celebrity influencer brands can sell you heavily polyester items for hundreds of pounds and people are willing to buy from them still, then we can't say sustainable fashion is too expensive. It suggests that price is not the issue for a lot of fast fashion shoppers. The whole idea goes back to what I was saying in my luxury fashion video, that price does not equate to quality, and we definitely shouldn't be using the former as a metric for whether something is sustainable or not, despite that being what a lot of us subconsciously tend to do. Okay, moving on to the point I wanted to make about fast fashion marketing and brand loyalty. I think there is definitely a perception online that sustainable fashion is boring, and I don't think that's true, but I do think sustainable fashion marketing is boring. And I spoke about this in a video before before called Is Sustainable Fashion Exciting Enough? But to summarize briefly here, because I do think the 2 points I've made are related. I think a big part of what H&M and Zara and mid-market fast fashion brands rely on to sell us these items that are more expensive than you would assume fast fashion would be is the desirability they create through the marketing of their brand. Sustainable fashion brands versus fast fashion brands have two different approaches marketing in my mind. Broadly speaking, of course, I think sustainable fashion brands wait for consumers to come to them with a problem they need solving. Like, hey, I need a jumper. Let's see if any sustainable brands have that and let me go search for it myself. And fast fashion brands, instead of waiting for consumers to come to them, invent reasons for them to come to us with the trend cycle and flash sales and really just aggressive marketing. Fast fashion's marketing is more create a problem and then provide a solution for it so that their consumers barely have to think about what they want. They're just being told what they want and how to buy it. One thing that isn't up for debate is how powerful fast fashion marketing truly is. They really know how to manipulate a narrative to suit them. And I kind of want to mention polyester here. Polyester is the cheapest fabric for brands to produce, and therefore it is everywhere. The issue is fashion brands are trying to disguise it by labeling it as anything other than polyester. Vegan knitwear, wool blend that's 0% wool, high-tech materials in athleisure that is just 100% polyester. Like, yes, I'm sure the product you've created is moisture wicking, but why are you purposely leaving out the fact that it's polyester in the garment title? One submission I got from a subscriber wanted me to cover the debate around whether we should only wear or thrift natural fiber clothing to avoid buying polyester clothing and the microfiber shedding that comes off of them even when you buy them secondhand, versus we should buy polyester clothing secondhand because otherwise they're going to end up in landfill. And I think this was really interesting, but my first thought was that anything that centers around us shopping for something as a solution isn't really a solution to sustainable fashion. And debating the ethics about who should be buying what focuses our energy on fighting about what people should be buying secondhand and who's right and who's wrong, rather than just demanding change, and kind of goes back to that discussion I was having with Mel on my podcast about being a citizen rather than a consumer and the impact that can have on change. Saying that, I know that this is a problem that a lot of people face that they want a solution to. My solution is to think about my own personal preference. If I don't want to be wearing polyester, then I'm not going to be thrifting polyester because I won't wear those clothes when I take them home, even if my motivation would be potentially saving them from landfill. If I find something that's really cute at the thrift store and it's made from 100% polyester, but I know I'm going to wear it, then I'll buy it. I think it really can be as simple as that. Again, I think it goes back to that idea of not over consuming and making sure you're buying things that you know you'll wear being the easiest way to shop sustainably. That does kind of briefly link into another myth I've seen online, that donating your clothes to charity shops isn't worth it because they're all going into the waste colonialism trade. And although this is anecdotal evidence, and I really hope people aren't just throwing their clothes into landfill, I think it is worth briefly mentioning the fact that donating your clothes is always the better option. If you don't want to donate it to a charity store because you're worried that it will join the waste colonialism trade, then donating it directly to people in need is the best option anyway. There are charities, like here in the UK, you can donate to Give Your Best, which allow people in vulnerable positions to shop freely for clothing. You can also attend a local swap shop event and take some of the clothes you don't need and come away with some you love. There's also recycling centres you can go to donate your fabric scraps if they're no longer in wearable condition, rather than throwing them in the bin, which then get recycled into things like sofa filling. And of course, you can upcycle your clothes or, downcycle them and use them around the house as cleaning rags, say. Literally anything other than just putting them in landfill. Okay, one of my last ones was highly requested about recycled polyester and microfibers and the sustainability and ethics of it. Now, I am not by any means an expert on material compositions and microfiber compositions and how that relates to our environment, but I do have some thoughts on recycled polyester especially. I think I've always been wary of recycled polyester schemes from brands because of how hard they push it and because of how it allows them to get away with still using this cheaper fabric rather than better quality natural materials. Although a lot of brand marketing centers around the idea that recycled polyester is better for the environment, it still requires significant energy to convert the virgin polyester into recycled, and that's often derived from non-renewable resources. It also involves quite a lot of chemicals, particularly in the case of breaking down the plastics so they can be reused. And of course, recycled polyester still releases microfibers when they're washed, which we all know is not a great thing. Despite all of that, it's still a good thing that brands are turning to recycled polyester over virgin polyester. Although we do have to be careful about where brands are sourcing the polyester from, whether it's from actual textile waste that's been broken down and turned into something new, or it's from plastic bottles, or ocean waste is another thing that brands love to market that actually isn't as sustainable as it sounds. And a really good example of this is the Adidas Parley collaboration that turned out to be greenwashing. So many of you were asking about microplastics, and I really want to cover this in more detail. I'm going to do a dedicated video, I think, and try to have an expert come on and answer these questions that you guys have, because I do think it's a very tricky subject to wrap your head around, and I don't think I would be the best person to cover it. So keep an eye out for that, because I'm hoping to do that soon. The last topic I want to cover is pretty quick, but I do think it's really important. It's about sustainability certifications that have become really popular recently, like brands becoming a B-Corp or marketing their cotton as GOTS certified. As a consumer, if you see these badges and these certifications being used by a brand in their marketing, you will be forgiven for thinking they definitely are sustainable, but that's not the case. Right now, there's no real regulation or oversight of these certification schemes, and often they're voluntary from brands, and that often leads to cheating and issues in the system. And an example of this is the organic cotton certifier GOTS being accused of massive systemic fraudulence in their organic cotton supply in India. B-Corp is a little bit different. A brand achieving B-Corp status is a little bit more trustworthy since the process is so long and lengthy and intensive. I was at a brand that was going through the certification process at the time, and it was a lot of work. It was a full-time job for somebody for a couple of months to answer all their questions. But again, the issue remains that brands are self-reporting a lot of these results. So there's room for error and there's room for rounding up. And alongside that, a couple of brands have been named as B Corp that you wouldn't expect to have been, given their controversies and very public practices. So I don't tend to trust this as a metric either, because in my mind, the certification process seems to be missing something. So yeah, I wouldn't blindly trust certification schemes that brands are currently collecting like infinity stones, and instead do your own research into whether a brand is sustainable or not for true peace of mind. Okay, I think I probably have to cut this video off there because this has been really long already. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. I'll try to reply to it in the comments or on the post I originally did. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything we've covered today, whether you have any points to add. I'd be really interested to hear it, so leave a comment. Make sure to subscribe and like this video if you haven't already, and have a lovely day. I'll speak to you really soon. Bye.